anyway, but I have to do what I have to do. So we'll just, I think we'll start. Okay. So you care? Oh, thank you. Okay, so I am Karen Sullivan, and excuse the darkness, the light bulb blew just before I signed on here tonight. So we have an eerie darkness. I am publisher of Orenda Books, and I recognize a lot of those names. So a lot of you will know that we are a small independent publisher based in London, and we publish literary fiction, so the high quality stuff, with a heavy emphasis on crime thrillers, which we're going to be talking about tonight in various forms. And about half of the list is in translation. I'm so glad that you could make it tonight. Thank you. So we are absolutely thrilled to celebrate the launch of 3 exceptional novels, thrillers, by 3 of truly the most brilliant writers, authors writing today. All are different, and all are doing something new and exciting and forging new paths in crime fiction, something that Jacky is undoubtedly going to talk about tonight. So coming to us live from Dunedin in New Zealand is our wonderful Vanda Symon, where she is currently trapped. Vanda is, of course, best known for her warmly funny, exceptionally plotted Sam Shepard series featuring young female cop Sam. They're witty and warm and wonderful. But tonight we're celebrating publication of an outstanding new standalone, Faceless. So this was first published exclusively in New Zealand about a decade ago, but Vanda has completely rewritten it and adapted this quite astounding book for the contemporary market. But its themes are honestly as relevant and contemporary and sobering as they ever were. She'll be talking about the plot tonight, so I won't say anything about it. In fact, all of the authors are going to showcase their elevator pitches for you. But rest assured, though, this is an extraordinary, electrifying read with a race against the clock tension, unforgettable characters, and some truly shocking scenes that will make you really, really think. So Val McDermott refers to Vanda as the new queen of New Zealand crime, and we honestly couldn't agree more. Next up, and tuning in from just outside Oxford, is Eve Smith, whose medical thrillers have been compared by The Guardian to Michael Crichton. We published Eve's debut, The Waiting Rooms, in full lockdown, and yet we reprinted less than 3 months after publication, and we're on the same track to do the very same thing with her stunning new thriller, Off Target. So Eve has a unique and awesome ability to write speculative thrillers that feel absolutely real and contemporary, addressing medical issues that are just a heartbeat away from really happening. I mean, who could have written a book about what is ostensibly a pandemic right before a pandemic? And in Off Target, she asks the question, how far would you go for the perfect baby? And with genetic engineering at its heart, an honestly nail-biting tension, and a real family drama, domestic noir, if you like, at its heart, it's a truly unforgettable read. And then coming to us from Hamburg in Germany, complete with a nasty case of COVID, is a cauliflower brain, she says, is the irrepressible queen of Krimi, Simone Buchholz. And this is the 5th book we published in the Chastity Riley series. Original gritty thrillers that literally crackle with energy and wrong-foot us at every turn. And she's here to talk to us about River Clyde. Yes, set in Glasgow. And this is different. This is what you might want to call true noir, less of a thriller, although there is an overwhelming tension, and more about crimes of the heart and mind and soul. This is an incredible achievement, and I really think it cements Simone as one of the most exciting authors writing in the genre today. We will see more of Chastity Riley in the future. We're going to go back to the beginning of her original series, which Simone is rewriting. And I hope she's smiling. Is that true? Yeah. And
yes, quite
and then we're gonna stagger with the new books that she's writing. I understand her next one that is not Chastity Riley has something to do with witches and unicorns. But we'll get to that later. Watch this space. And of course, we can't mention any of these books, any of these translated books, without including the wonderful Rachel Ward, who has translated all of the Chastity Riley series with all the style and color and immense humor and grace that was in the original text. And I can't even begin to imagine how it works. So it's such a multifaceted, unique kind of book. The humor, the one sentence chapters, but hilarious chapter titles. But master it she does, and we'll be hearing from Rachel a little later on this evening. But what all these three books do have in common is the fact that they represent to a T the kind of publishing I want to do here at Orenda Books. Bold, original, and yes, that word again, original, thought-provoking, beautifully written, and full of issues and characters and sophisticated plotting. That means you never forget them. I don't ever want to publish a book where someone says, what was that book again? Hopefully with an Orenda book, one of these three books, you won't. So leading the proceedings tonight is the amazing Dr. Noir, Dr. Jacky Collins, founder of Newcastle Noir Crime Festival, and an amazing crime fiction aficionado, and a huge friend of both me and Orenda Books, right from the very beginning, huge supporter and friend. And Jacky is a former senior lecturer at Northumbria University in literature, film, and TV, and Spanish language and culture. She's currently based at Stirling University in Scotland, and she's coming to us live from Edinburgh. Jacky co-hosts a fortnightly crime fiction podcast or radio program on Spice FM. She hosts literary events with Honey and Stag events, and she's a member of the Corylist book team, a relatively new independent publisher of translated crime fiction from Romania, Iceland, and beyond. They have a new newsletter, I understand, so you might want to sign up for that if you like translated stuff. So Jacky's a huge inspiration and support, and I urge you to follow everything she does. So welcome everyone. We have signed copies of all of these books available from Berts Books, and I would urge you to order your copies from there if you can, if you don't have them already. So Bert is just about to open a brand new physical bookshop in Swindon, and we'd love to put our business his way. He is mega supportive. His books come wrapped, tied with a ribbon even. And he looks after our Orenda subscription boxes, and really he's found his niche in the online book market, and everybody loves him. So let's give him some support. The truth is that publishing and the book industry is tough right now for the little guys, ourselves included. And it is readers like you who keep us afloat and able to do what we do, deliver outstanding, exceptional reads that the mainstream guys just don't do. So thank you for your support, and Bert thanks you too. He's on @Berts Books on Twitter and www.bertsbooks.co.uk, so super easy. These are fantastic authors, perfect Easter reading if you haven't read them before, and honestly some of the best examples of contemporary crime fiction you may ever read. So I'm going to now hand things over to Jacky. If you have a question at any point, please use the Q&A facility below. If there's a problem, you can try it in chat, but it would be easier if you could do the Q&A just for easy access. So I will now bow out, and I will pass you over to Jacky to talk about these amazing books and these wonderful writers. And good luck, everyone. Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. No doubt that you are here because you know good crime fiction. And this evening, the books that we are going to talk about and just really go deep into these stories. As Karen's already said, I think the idea of crime fiction being taken to a next level, authors who demonstrate the flexibility of this genre, maybe combining it with other genre or just taking it in a different direction. The thought of being able to celebrate 3 books in one evening is fabulous. But I would give a gentle word of caution, because these books pack such a punch that you really will want to take your time between each one. They really made me think of the notion of sitting down to the most sumptuous meal and just the time for digestion, because each book will leave you with questions that will linger so long about yourself and about society as well. So buckle up for the ride of your life with these texts. Buckle up for something so fresh. But as I say, they do come with a slight word of warning, okay? Not to be taken frivolously. They need to be savoured well. They make me think of whiskey that's aged so well in the barrel, that you want to savour every drop. They really, really are. Authors, you are just fabulous, magnificent, and amazing. And Rachel will come to you and just to say thank you for being, one of those people when it's crime in translation, you allow us to go there. Thank you. I want to talk to you a little bit about, the joy that you bring with the work that you do. But from me and over to you, lovely authors. And I'm going to ask, before we get into the questions, you know what you need to do, that elevator pitch. Vanda, do you want to start for us?
I knew you were going to do that.
Yeah. Do you know what else? I'm just thinking that idea of we're actually twin cities, aren't we, between Edinburgh and Dunedin? So it's gorgeous. Yes, I love it. Yes. Yeah.
Oh yes, Dunedin, New Zealand, city of literature, like Edinburgh, city of literature. But anyway, my elevator pitch. So Bradley is trapped in middle class hell. He's in a job that is over demanding to him. He's got a wife he feels doesn't appreciate him, and out of frustration one day he decides that he's just got to do something for that release, and he picks up a prostitute, totally out of character, makes some really bad decisions, and things start spiraling out of control for him. Billy lives on the streets. She is a talented street artist, but she's had a tough life and she turns tricks to get by, and unfortunately she meets up with Bradley. Max is on the streets too, but he's just a shell and a husk of a man, and his friend Billy's missing, and he made a pact that he was going to have her back. So can Max drag himself up and face his demons to get out there and find Billy before it's too late?
Wonderful. Thank you. Ow. Wonderful. So we'll leave behind that trio of characters. And of course, there's a fourth character that I'd like to talk about as well, but we'll leave behind that trio of character, and Eve will come to you, Eve, with your dystopian ideas.
So off target. Imagine a future where children are genetically engineered. A world where parents will take immense risks to ensure that their babies are perfect. So Susan is desperate to become a mother. She's been trying for years. And finally, after an impulsive one-night stand, her dream comes true. So she will do anything to keep her secret and keep her baby and ensure her husband never finds out, including the unthinkable. But as children around the globe start experiencing horrific symptoms, she realizes that her actions are going to have deadly consequences.
Yeah. You see what I mean, readers and lovers of crime fiction, that these books, they really do leave their mark, and that's only with the elevator pitches so far. Simone, please, if you will.
Those elevator pitches were just great. And yes, I'm with my cauliflower brain at the moment because I'm having COVID, but I will try. Okay. While the streets are burning in Hamburg and the police is just refusing to work and trapped in Prosecco with ice instead, State Prosecutor Chastity Riley is fleeing or flying, whatever you like, to Glasgow to investigate her Scottish roots, her soul, the violence and losses in her family. And she meets a lot of people, a lot of whiskey, a talking deer, and a ghost.
Perfect.
It's a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale.
It's Simone. It's really funny. Recently at work, we've been looking at magical realism, and reading your book, there was that resonance there. I loved it. That even though I've been in Latin America with it, you know, to be in Scotland with it as well was wonderful. So 3 amazing books. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. And what I'm going to do, if it's all right with people, questions have started coming in from people tuning in. So at various points, I will take them as well to make sure that we get through everybody else's questions as well. I think that's really important. But my first question and it's the same to all of you, as I've said, you know, these books are deep in emotions, deep in moral dilemma, deep in scenes that can sometimes be extremely uncomfortable. And I wondered if at any point you needed to walk away from what you were writing just to take a break, because I say they are so intense in places. And so I wondered, you know, how did that affect you as the person? You know, this story is coming out of you. You are creating this story. Was there at any point when you needed to walk away, or were you just happy to go along with it? Eve, how was it for you?
Wow. I don't know if I wanted to walk away. There were some really difficult scenes, and probably the thing that I found really hard that I wanted to do justice to was my character's Susan struggles with infertility with her husband, which is why it's taken her so long to get pregnant. And that was that's really painful. I do a lot of research, as you know, Jacky, and I came across some pretty harrowing stories. So actually, rather than run away, if I'm honest, my technique is I just bury myself in every bit of research I can. And I had a mate of a mate who'd literally been through 12 rounds of IVF, and she became my sort of expert coach on those issues. So we exchanged really frank conversations about her journey, and you know, to make sure that what I was writing was true to that very difficult subject. So yeah, I probably burrow in rather than run away.
Yeah, I like that, burrowing in, or that immersion, just to be very much a part of it constantly until you're done with it, in a sense. And I love that as well, that even though the book is finished and published, of course, it'll always ever be, you know, that part of you. So yeah, okay. Vanda, were you an immersion? Did you stick in, or were there times where you just had to take a time out?
I was sort of more probably in the doggedly determined camp. So with this book, I really had to nudge my own personal boundaries on what I was prepared to put on a page, and you know, look at some very, very, very dark matters. And so it was mentally challenging, sort of intellectually challenging, quite emotionally challenging as well, when you're trying to describe, or you know, have something really awful happening to, you know, in particular to Billy, because you know, I just felt such an association with her, to do it in a way that portrayed what was happening in a gritty and real way, but without getting into gratuity, you know, finding a way of describing things. And so, but also within that, having hope as an underlying factor. So I didn't feel I needed to walk away from it as such, but sometimes I did have to make myself sit in my butt in my chair and and just write this passage, just get this down. So yeah, I kind of had my own little talisman as well. Actually the same one that Billy has in the book.
Oh, did you want to say what that is? Are you allowed to say what it is?
Yeah, I'll say it. So in the book, Billy has to find her inner strength, and it's not giving away any spoilers or anything, but what she does is she looks to the memories of her grandmother and her boo-boo. And so for me, I was kind of looking to that too. So the boo-boo, the grandmother in the book, Billy's grandmother, is actually my great-grandmother, who is this woman here. So
yeah.
So she was kind of like my anchor point, and so having that anchor point helped me to be able to write this.
Thank you, and we'll hold on to that family link as well, because it goes really nicely with Simone's book and family connection. But Simone, before we talk about the family connection, because Chastity, this novel takes her maybe to an inner place that she might, whilst it transports her physically, there's an inner journey that goes on here. And I just wondered whether that, charting that journey with Chastity, was that a tricky one for you to deal with her emotions and the whole grief that is part of, many people's story in the novel as well?
First of all, I have to maybe just tell you how the circumstances of writing were, because that is tells maybe a lot. I wrote it in the first half of the pandemic, so from March 2020 to September 2020, and I did over, I don't know, 8 months. I had to do homeschooling. So because the schools were closed. So I had this being a teacher work from 8:30 in the morning to 2:00 in the afternoon. And then totally different work, writing a book. And, it's a book about loss and a book about grief and a book about reason to live. And writing about all these things in the middle of a completely shattered reality, where nothing is reliable anymore. And doing this on our little western balcony, because I don't have a room for my own here in our 60 square meter flat. So I had every day 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon sitting on a windy balcony under an umbrella against the rain or the wind or the sun, and trying to kind of fix the story. And I think if you read the book, you get it very quickly. It's just about shattered realities and desperately trying to hold on to your existence and to settle somewhere, to put yourself somewhere on this timeline. And I think, I feel it every time when I'm reading from the book, oh my God, oh gosh, what happened? And, everyone of us knows the feeling and from spring 2020, what the fuck happened? So.
Yeah. But I would say again that each one of these books, whilst their stories are so different, brings with it that sense of, oh my God, what has just happened in their storylines. And so I love the way there are themes here, although on face value, these books just seem to be going in totally different directions, and yet those connections are wonderful. Now, Asim's asked a question, and I think as we're at the beginning of looking at these books, it's a really good thing to ask. Whilst you were writing these books, could you give us one interesting fact that you discovered? Now, I know there'll be so many to choose from, again, because of all that you put in to these novels, but can you pin it down to one thing that's still you know, after all that time is still with you. Eve, you're nodding, so I think there's something there. Yeah. Do you want to go ahead on this one?
Go for it. Yeah, let's go for it. So people often say to me, well, you know, could this happen? How close is this world of genetic engineering of babies? So my fact is that it's already happened about 4 or 5 years ago in China, in that the embryos, twin embryos, were genetically edited by a scientist, ostensibly to make them resistant to HIV. And he also edited another baby girl. And no one really knows what's happened to these children and what the long-term effects are, because there was a massive outcry. And the Chinese government went from celebrating this amazing sort of achievement to very quickly retreating. And he was actually put in prison for it. But no one, certainly in the West, knows where these children are, what's happened to them, whether they're still healthy, and what the long-term effects are going to be. So that's pretty scary.
And as your bio says, you write about things that scare you. I'm just intrigued again about the research that you do to discover, because something like that is not common knowledge. And I think, you know, the way you discover things is just the, you know, testimony again to, you know, you're not just putting some words on paper. This is, you know, this is, I was going to say meaty, but that's not good, is it? It's corny stuff. I don't know, but you know what I mean? So thank you.
My warped imagination, Jacky.
Which is also very, very good. Very good. Yeah. Simone, what has stayed with you? Maybe, you know, the things that you discovered that whilst you were writing?
Before River Clyde, I always said crime literature is realism. And when I wrote River Clyde, I noticed that no, it's magic realism for me. And the fact I discovered it is that in Rannoch Moor, which is 2 hours up north from Glasgow, they're having ice mermaids living there. And that's true.
I was going to say, do you have pictures that you could put up for us? But maybe that's for another time. So ice mermaids, okay, genetic engineering in China, ice mermaids, and Vanda in Auckland, where the story's set.
Well, actually, the facts I'm not going to, what I want to talk about is not one that when I was originally writing the book, because as you mentioned earlier, or as Karen mentioned earlier, and this book was originally written quite some time ago, but in doing the edits and just doing some of the research around some of the social issues, what was some of the statistics on homelessness, which were really quite awful, because when you see homeless people on the streets, it's often the men you see, you know, that seems to be the face of homelessness, but homelessness itself actually incorporates a lot more than just the people living rough on the streets. You know, it's the people who live in cars, it's the woman in shelters when they're escaping violence, it's the people who end up sofa surfing, it's the people who end up taking them and their family, joining in with other families, so you have like 17, 18 people crammed in a 3-bedroom house. So homelessness is quite vast, and in New Zealand actually 50% of the homeless people were women, and 80% of those were Maori women, and often they had dependent children, and that was part of the contributing factors, was just that the poverty just contributing, and inequity contributing so much to it. So yeah, finding out some of the gritty statistics for that was a real eye-opener and quite heartbreaking.
Thank you so much for sharing those things that resonated as you were creating the stories, and things that have stuck with you. I'm just going to slip a couple of my own questions in before coming back to other questions that have been put up by other people. And Simone, I wondered about the link between Hamburg and Glasgow, and I wonder, you know, of all the rivers in all the world, you know, the River Clyde, when you were, you know, when this next Chastity Riley story starts to emerge, did you know you were going to take her to Glasgow and then into the countryside from there?
I always knew that she's half American, but I always knew that she has Scottish roots because her name, Riley, she's named after a Celtic player I have seen in the Celtic stadium in, I think, 2005, when I started to create the character. There was one striker, he was called Nicky Riley, and I just liked him. It was like, he had freckles and funny hair and looked so like a guy from Scotland. So she's named after a Scottish striker, football player. So I always knew there were Scottish roots, and I think in book number, in Mexico Ring, I felt like I have to end this hell for her, putting her constantly through the mill, as we say in German. And to repair a person like this, you can't repair her by giving her a husband or a man or something. You have to seduce her with something more that has more weight. And for her, like I thought, like, it might be a home, it might be a house, it might be to discover her roots and to deal with everything that happened in her childhood. And so, yeah, I thought about Scotland, and for me, I don't know, I like Edinburgh, but I love the grittiness of Glasgow, and I love the Glaswegian people, and the cities are somehow linked. And the River Clyde and our river in Hamburg, the River Elbe, are like siblings in a way. So the River Clyde is kind of a sad river because no one's interested in it anymore. And our river is very lively, and the people are celebrating there, and it's totally integrated in the city. But both rivers are just cutting the cities in two halves, and there's a north part and the south. And it felt like totally natural for me to walk through Glasgow, looking at the city through her eyes, and to explore kind of the Scottish soul. So that was the reason why I had to go up, of course, of it.
Thank you for that. Vanda, I wonder if I could ask you about not writing Sam. And what this, because this, as Karen shared with us, this is a rewriting of a previous work of yours. But I wondered what opportunities, just putting Sam to one side, and what has that meant for you?
It was nothing against Sam, but it was really lovely not to write Sam, because Sam's written entirely in the first person. So I'm inhabiting this woman's head, and I've inhabited her head for so many books. So for me, it was really quite refreshing to write from the perspective of different people. In this case, it's from 4 different people, and not in the first person. So writing in the third person and using different tenses and things, and how everyone's viewpoint differed. So for those who read the book, sometimes I'll describe a scene from one person's viewpoint and then from the other person's viewpoint. So that element of it was really, really refreshing. But in saying that, I did miss Sam, because she's so in my head all the time that I'm enjoying writing her again. But it certainly gave opportunities to bust out and not get stuck in, because you don't want to be stuck in a rut as a writer doing the same thing each time. You want to explore different stories, different places, different scenarios, and getting inside other people's heads was great.
Thank you for that. Eve, I wondered, like, an alternative strapline for your book, almost be careful what you wish for.
Oh, very good. Like that.
Because the idea of so many people do desire, first of all, desire a child, and then desire a child that is well and that is healthy, and I wondered, the journey that you take us on through the story, Susan's desire. Are you getting the morality of it? Are you telling us or warning us to be careful with the things that we wish for?
Well, I've tried really hard not to kind of give a clear viewpoint on the rights and wrongs.
Yeah.
And there are rights and wrongs, definitely. And I do have a sort of personal view about the lengths I think we should go to. But it is a warning. It's a warning about how far we could go. So obviously Off Target takes things to an extreme, which isn't necessarily possible yet, but totally could be, I feel, going forward. And really the book asks, how far would you be prepared to go to guarantee those things? Because it's entirely natural as a mother or an aspiring mother, like you say, to want the best for your child. And we can already do amazing things like, genetically screen babies during IVF and make sure we pick embryos that don't have inherited horrible terminal diseases. And nobody's up in arms about that. That seems quite sensible, although some people don't like that.
Yeah.
So what, easy to slide down the next step of starting to tinker around and cut out illnesses maybe. But the problem is this is this massive slippery slope. And really that's the point of the book, is that I think we've all got our different cutoff points about what we think is right and wrong. And some people don't want any intervention at all. Some people think any intervention in the process of childbirth is wrong. So I guess I want people to go through that journey, and it's been lovely reading reviews where people have gone, oh my God, I just had to sit down and think, what would I do? And people's view of Susan changes. People empathize with her because of the whole struggle. And then the second half of the book, without giving game away, I have alternating viewpoints between her and her daughter. And all of a sudden you get what is it like to be the child that has been manipulated? What is it like for that person? And all of a sudden people have said that their allegiances have shifted, and it's been a really interesting journey. So yeah, I think everyone has to make up their own minds, but the point is at least we're thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, now you talk about a shifting of allegiance, and just to come back to Vanda, and how Bradley, if I can say, at the beginning, he seems to be this really bullied, downtrodden individual. But again, what happens to him and how he reacts to that, you make us think again. Yeah. Go on. Do you want us to talk a little bit more about that character and how you go? Sorry, I'll shut up. You talk, please.
Well, with when I was first thinking about this book, I asked myself two simple questions. One was, what would it take to turn a good man bad, and what would it take to turn a bad man good? And so Bradley was actually slightly inspired by the husband of a friend. And weirdly enough, because, observing from the outside, she emasculated him constantly. And, my little writer brain was thinking, gosh, from his perspective, what's that like? What's it like living in that world? And in many ways, he himself is faceless. He's one of these workers who goes today, has a fairly boring standard job, fairly average life and everything like that. And so I wanted to explore, okay, what would it take for someone who felt powerless when they finally got a little twinge of power and a feeling of power? Would they grasp that? Would they rail from it? Would their what was their underlying character that they even didn't know was there, would that come forth? So yeah, that's where Bradley came from.
Yeah, and they all say, don't they, do be careful if you're friends with an author, to be careful, because they're watching all
we
the time.
Shamelessly mine other people's lives.
That's right. Simone, you mentioned the sadness of the River Clyde, and it makes me think again of the River Tyne in Newcastle, and the idea of what a river was and you know, all that is captured there in history, but you do write, you write from the point of view of the river as well. And I mean, without wishing to say, you know, what have you been doing with your time? But how often have you actually sat by the Clyde and felt its waters and felt history move through it?
Well, I was really walking along the Clyde a lot and crossing it, and always felt like, who are you? It was, yeah, not the kind of river I know. So how are you? And he didn't answer. I always say he. For me, it's male. It's a male river. And a few minutes ago, I told you how I was writing on my 3 hours in the afternoon on my balcony. And when I was ready with the first draft, I felt, and I was reading it, and I thought, like, oh God, it's falling into pieces. This is not a novel. I need something that holds it together. And I was sitting by our river in late summer 2020 with a friend of mine who's a musician. And we were drinking beer, watching the River Elbe. And I asked him, what would you do if you have written a song and there's something missing? It's falling apart. What would you do? Would you add another voice or another vocal or another instrument? And he said, maybe I would use some strings, some dark undercurrent, you know, some dark strings. And he was having a sip of his beer, looking at the river and said, something like a river. Just listen to the sound. And I said, yeah, a dark undercurrent, a river. I know a river that is exactly like that. So, and then I just tried to weave in the voice of the Clyde. And after 2 little chapters, I had the feeling that, well, that it works. It brings it together. It was the missing color, the missing voice to fix my problem. So, and I deeply believe in rivers fixing human problems.
Now, is it because of the flow of the water that it carries things away? Do you think? What is that element that the water has that does that?
It's just water, and water is life. And you know, people settle. In the beginning of mankind, people settled around the fire or near the water. And I think water is everything. It just fixes problems, or of course it can cause problems too. It's life.
It's interesting though that there's just been a comment popped up on the chat, which I thought was really interesting. That idea that you know, people who live there, many people, you know, turn their back on the river. You know, it's like it's a thing that is almost like forgotten or not wanting to be acknowledged. And yet maybe, you know, the idea of turning back, listening, what is there, what resonates back through history,
yeah,
through
maybe
experience.
just put some chairs and a bench and sit down and have a bottle of beer and just look at the river.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, and thank you for that point of view as well. A question from Anne, and it's to Eve, and it's a beautiful question. She says, you know, given the focus of the book, she wants, are we as humans entitled to carry on reproducing given the state of our planet?
Oh, Anne, have you been peeking into my computer for book 3?
Bet she has.
I'm not kidding you. Oh my goodness, that's right in the heart there. Well now, I think infertility, I'm going to bore you now, I won't bore you. Infertility rates actually are going to start majorly declining. In fact, they already are. in Western countries. We're below replacement level. That's a great thing, isn't it? Replacement level. So actually in the West, we are already, in fact, in some countries, it's actually crashing and governments are quite worried about it. But that's not answering your question. That's just a by the by, because eventually everything will start to go down again. The reality is, yeah, there's way too many people on the planet, and that's a fact. And unless we can work out a way to use our resources more sustainably, it's not going to work. But the key issue is not actually the number of people, it's the amount we consume per person. So actually, the West is the shocker. Even though our population is going down, we still consume vastly more, like vastly more than the entire African continent put together. I think I read a fact about the US population. It was just staggering. So really, the issue is not the number of babies we have. The issue is what we consume when we have them, and we need to really get better at that.
Yeah. You see, look at this. These questions that I mean are put forward by us, the people that are watching, and the responses. You know, this. Who says that crime fiction is this? You know, has no depth, has no sort of like substance to it. Far from it. And again, just reiterate that the books we're discussing tonight demonstrate that so very, very clearly. Vanda, there's a question for you as well from Anne. It's cracking questions. Anne says, I have such admiration for the depth of character you create. Homeless people are also often portrayed as hopeless, useless, and with no real backstory. And she asks, you know, did you meet with street people when you were creating the book, when you're doing your research?
I didn't meet with street people, but you know, I'm like many writers, I'm an observer, and when you see people, you always ask. One of the things internal questions I often ask is, you know, when I see someone is, I wonder what your story is. And I wonder what your story is. And with homeless people, you know, when I did see them, so in New Zealand, you don't see people sitting on the streets as often as you do. I got a real shock when I first travelled overseas, and I feel like, for example, travelled to San Francisco, and there were people living rough on the streets everywhere, and that was something that I was quite unaccustomed to seeing. Occasionally you'd see it in Auckland, which is where I had encountered it. I always found it very confronting because it was quite different, and I didn't know how to react. But that sort of inner empathic part of you always sort of wonders, gosh, you know, how did you come to be in this awful situation? So it was really sort of looking into that. Okay, no, let's find out what some of these stories are. And I often said to my children, you know, particularly if we were passing people who were sitting and begging or things like that, is, you know, they're not that removed from us. It could be only a matter of, you know, weeks of not having pay, or, you know, just one or two poor choices, or having, you know, never had enough of anything. So, you know, always look to people with compassion and actually think, you know, what has brought you to this place. So in this book, I really wanted to bring that out. And particularly so with creating that backstory for both Billy and for Max, and that, you know, they were quite different perspectives that they came from. One came from tragedy, one came from sort of like family dynamics, and the reasons why people are there are very complex. You know, some of them can actually be quite simple, you know, straight down to poverty, but poverty again has many different reasons why they've come to that point and why they aren't being supported by people. And, you know, and that simple question, why aren't they being supported by people? So, you know, that was very much the standpoint that I was coming from.
Thank you, Vanda. Thank you for that. If Rachel, if I might bring you in here, if that's okay, and I'd love to ask, you know, because you translate many things, but if you could sum up, what is your experience of working with Simone's writing? When you pick up that text, when you get into it, how does it feel?
I really enjoy working with Simone's writing because it's always very interesting and it's always doing something and every word feels very well chosen, and like it's working hard, like it's there for a reason, that she's used that word and not another word. And so it's sort of a challenge to find something that does the same job, even if it's actually seems very different. It's sort of trying to get to the same effect. It's definitely a challenge, and it's definitely a pleasure working with Simone's work.
And it's beautiful to be able to read her because of what you do. Thank you so much for that. And what always astounds me is how, through the series, that voice is there. It's not that it changes, because maybe you're feeling differently about, the world at one point, or this is happening in my life, that you maintain that authorial voice. I think that is wonderful. I wonder, and this might be tricky, all right, but in fact, David's put up a question, and I'm going to use this because it works really well. And this is it's to both of you, the partnership of writing that we've got here in translation. And he says, so Rachel and Simone, he says, how do you come up with something like, it's the opposite of innocuous small talk, it's enormous talk, and very innocuous indeed?
Usually with a lot of initial hair tearing out and swearing and massive brainstorming and asking everybody I know who speaks German and everyone I know who doesn't speak German what they would do in this situation. So Simona's original was something about unverfängliche small talk. So that would be like uncatching. So verfangen, so it's talk that doesn't sort of catch you up or commit you to anything, maybe something of that sort. And so she says it's not unverfänglich, it verfängt, it catches, it snarls, it tangles you up. And
I love this.
And so then you put unverfänglich in the dictionary and you look at every possible word, every possible shade of meaning, and then you put those in the thesaurus and you look at every possible option, and then you play with them and you think and you ask people and you say, what would they do? And then somebody very kindly says that maybe you could play on innocuous and noccuous, and then you discover that there once upon a time was a word noccuous, because it's one of these words that we've lost the opposite and we only have half of it.
Thank you for bringing it back.
And so it's very collegial. There's a lot of brainstorming and a lot of asking for advice and help, and I'm very grateful to the people who helped me do it.
Thank you for talking about your process. I think that's very generous of you to tell us about that. If I may as well, just again, very, just the nuts and bolts. Do you email Simone with your questions, or do you go on Zoom nowadays, or do you go on the phone? How do you two communicate about things?
Generally by email. I usually save up the questions for the end, and I think I've asked all the questions, and then Simone very patiently answers them, and then I discover another page worth of questions, and then usually when we're going through the edits there's another few more that pop up. But it is usually email, but it has occasionally been on Twitter, it has occasionally been sending a video of a movement. When somebody does something with their hands, is it like this or is it like that?
I love that. I love it when Rachel's sending videos. I love it. And you know what? These really annoying questions are the best thing to improve your writing. Because when Rachel doesn't understand something, I just was not precise enough. So I have to, you know, I have to rethink about these kind of words, and no, maybe next time you go the other way around. And that's great. It's a great co-working. I love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing with us about how you two work together. You see, because we pick up that text and we just don't see, you know, all that you've been through, first of all individually, and then back together, and that. So thank you. I will be back again with translation thoughts. But Eve, I wanted to come to you with that notion of the challenge of the second novel, because I think each author here tonight has either done that thing of going down a different path, leaving a beloved character behind, but you had the challenge with Off Target of the dreaded second novel. Were you fazed by that, or are you just such a cool customer? It's like, I'm not taking into account at all that it's number 2. I'm just going to go and give it everything I've got.
I wouldn't definitely wouldn't describe myself as a cool customer when it comes to my writing. I think I share as many insecurities as every other writer going. I already had the idea, though, even before I signed with Karen. I had the idea for Off Target, and I'd already worked out the idea a little bit. I'd worked it up, and actually I had it before I even signed with my agent, and I showed him. I said, this is my idea for the next book. So actually that dread of not knowing what you're going to do next, because I'm not a series writer, that I didn't have that. I just had to write it well. And therein, you know, lies the rub, I guess, because with your first novel, you spend so long getting it right, because that's the one that's got to get you an agent, and that's the one that's got to get you a publisher, and you just do a gazillion edits. Whereas this one I did in a much shorter time frame. So I probably made some basic errors again, because it had been a while since I'd written something new, and Karen will tell you I had to do some fairly brutal edits. God, I ignored my 3-act structure at my peril. Won't be doing that again, I can tell you. Oh my God. Oh, the pain. So actually I found it harder with book 3, because I didn't have the idea for book 3 before I finished Off Target, but thankfully I have got it now. So we're okay, we're off and running. Whew, all is good.
Yeah. Oh, Karen's coming on to say something.
She's going to comment on, on the edits now.
Do you want to unmute, Karen?
Sorry. You'd think I'd know how to do this by now. No, I'm not saying anything at all, just joining in the fun. Oh. I know that some people will probably have things they need to go to. So please, lovely readers, guests, please don't feel badly if you do need to leave. That's completely understandable. So carry on.
Maybe carry on. Thank you.
We have a few more minutes, I think.
Yeah. So, and it's to the 4 of you. I think this will work. So for Rachel, it's you, the translated part. But what I would like to ask is, in the creation of these stories, which is the bit that you had to wrestle with the most? So it might be a certain chapter or a character trait or a plot aspect, because when we get the joy of reading this, we don't know the blood, sweat and tears that has gone into it again. So where did you think this is going out of the window, or I can't get beyond this? Was there a moment like that, or are you all just consummate authors that it just rolls off the fingers so beautifully? Vanda, do you want to start?
So definitely not consummate author, God. Probably for me, it was that constant internal wrestle of how far I was prepared to push my boundaries, where the line in the sand was, and whether I was just going to nudge my toes gently over it or do a little leap. So yeah, and that was quite exhausting because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I really wanted to be able to portray the tension, the potential violence, awfulness of the scenes, but do it in such a way that, you know, I don't like reading gratuitous violence, anything like that. So, you know, really wrestling with, okay, where is that line? And sometimes it was really quite hard to stick your finger on it because it moved around.
Did you go over though? Were there points where you have gone over what normally for you would have been a line that you wouldn't have crossed before?
Oh, well, most of that book was across my line.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was challenging because I'm quite conservative. So, you know, really did have to push myself on that front. And where my line is, of course, is different to other people's lines. So some people will read that and think, oh, you know, it's dark, but, you know, it's okay. And yet others have read that and thought, whoa, no, that's just too much for me. So, you know, everyone's internal line is in a different place. So it was trying to find a space that was dealing with where my demarcation was, but also being mindful of what a reader's idea of what was too much or what was too little is.
I thought it was, Vanda, I have to say, I thought you absolutely nailed it, because I don't like gratuitous violence either, and I just thought it was really like gripping, but so beautifully and sensitively told as well. honestly, I thought it was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
So Simona, in Chastity's return or finding home, where did you wrestle most?
I think with the ghosts, because there's one ghost where I thought it would be difficult, because if you can write ghosty ghosts, but when you're using a kind of hard-boiled language, and the characters are all like talking very cool and laid back, and then implement a ghost, someone who's dead. So I thought that would be very tricky, but in fact, as she is Chastity's aunt, she's just like her, only dead. And so that worked out very well. But there's another ghost appearing, and I didn't knew about that before. So her best friend, like her father figure, who's not there anymore, and he suddenly he appeared in the middle of the story, and I wasn't expecting it, and that's the sad point of the ghost stories. And I was almost not able to write that, because, you know, I lost him too. I'm writing this series for so many years already, and when he died in the book before, I was really crying. It was rough. And then, you know, I wasn't done with it. And then he appeared again, like bleeding from here and just standing around and saying, hi, hello. And that was so sad. And I felt like, okay, I can skip that. I can just not do it. But that wouldn't have been fair to this character. So I said, okay, then he's there again too. Okay. And that were parts of the story where I wasn't so, I didn't fancy to go there, let's say. Like that.
But the ghost took you there, which I think is lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rachel, just because we're talking about that text, so in all that beauty that's there, was there a point where you thought, I just cannot, all the help from everybody else, this is just, I
mean, there's two really. There's it being in Glasgow, and I'm English, I'm from London, I live in rural Norfolk. So there was the whole needing people who are meant to be from Glasgow to sound like they're from Glasgow, which again took a lot of help from Glaswegian or Scottish colleagues. And there's a scene where Calabretta and Stepanovic are sitting in their car playing Fortnite, and just this long, this enormously long conversation, which makes absolutely no sense unless you are in the world of gaming. And so Simone just put a video, a voice recorder under her son when he was playing games.
Yeah. I just recorded my son playing Fortnite with his dudes all over the world, and then just wrote it, taped it down, and read it to him and said, "Is this right?" And he said sometimes, "No, that was wrong. You got it wrong." I would say that it was just, it makes absolutely no sense. It's just completely lost.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, my sons play video games as well, but not Fortnite. So that so some of the language is the same, and some of it I could use, but I had to find colleagues with bilingual children who play Fortnite in English and German.
Yeah.
Sorry for that.
Yeah.
And other people who work in gaming translation, and so that, because we needed it to be the same, we needed it to be impenetrable to non-gamers but plausible to any gamer who happened to be reading it.
That fine balance. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. And last but by no means least, Eve, your wrestle moment.
I mean, there is quite a violent scene right at the start of the book, which I added in later. And that was uncomfortable, but I probably a bit like you said, Vanda, I kind of switched into, okay, well, how would this happen? And I did quite a bit of research about that as well. But then you end up, I mean, God, if anybody ever looks at my internet search history, I'm probably going to get taken away, because I just type in the most ridiculous questions. It's just like, how does a stranglehold affect you in A&E? Would you have a neck collar after this? You know, I'm just, oh my goodness. So the stuff you have to end up typing into Google. But yeah, so I think, I don't really like very violent things. I prefer to more insinuate, but that had to be done. And so that was probably my wrestle moment, but obviously I just dived into the detail to take sanctuary in the research as ever.
Thank you. Authors, Rachel, thank you so much. Karen, I'll hand back to you if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, we always learn so much from these authors. I could actually sit here all night and listen to you. I think anyone who's struggling with their work in progress is going to sit on a windy balcony in Hamburg with an umbrella over their laptop, or put a phone recording underneath their child's game. What the things we learn. But honestly, these are incredible authors, incredible books that I am honored, humbled to publish. And I do urge you to read them all if you haven't. Jacky, what amazing questions, and also the attendees' questions too.
Yeah.
But Jacky, you always get exactly what I want to get across, and I'm so grateful for that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so thank you, Rachel. I'm in awe. The more I hear, the more I remember when Simone said, okay, so my next book, there is a river who talks, and there is a deer who talks, and there is a ghost, and I'm like, okay, let's go. And I think Rachel will deal with it. So it's good. So different authors, different books bring different challenges, but luckily we have Rachel. But anyway, these are all different, all amazing, all thought-provoking, and wonderful. So thank you for being here. If you do want to buy them, our sort of bookseller of the event is Berts Books, and you'll get your books delivered tied with a ribbon and a book plate, signed book plate inside. And hopefully we'll see you soon at another event. And so we're going to say goodbye to Vanda from Dunedin. and from Hamburg, our wonderful Simona, and Eve, who is flying off to South Africa after waiting for years to get back to the setting of her debut novel, The Waiting Rooms, and from outside, outside Norwich. Are you quite far outside Norwich?
Not very far outside Norwich, no.
Not
just
far
in the-
outside Norwich. We have Rachel. Thank you so much. I mean, your contribution is essential for us to be able to read these books, and I just can't imagine how you even begin to do it. And Jacky, always Jacky, you're amazing. Thank you, and thank you all for coming. Hope you had fun.
Yeah.